Steve Jewin, aka Stevie J, with a breaking news update for this edition of Glove Up or Shut Up. When we recorded this show, the original main event for UFC Fight Night 76 in Dublin was Joe Duffy versus Dustin Poirier. However, circumstances have changed due to the fact that Joe Duffy suffered a concussion while he was training for this fight. He has withdrawn from the fight, and the main event has been changed. It is now Luis Smolka versus Patrick Holohan. So Joe Duffy is off the UFC Fight Night 76 card. Dustin Poirier did not want a new opponent. He would rather wait and face Joe Duffy at a later date because, in his words, that's the fight I've trained 10 weeks for. More developments as they come, but you can ignore what we said about Duffy versus Poirier in the main event. This was pre-recorded, so there's nothing we can do about that. Enjoy the show in Dublin and enjoy Glove Up or Shut Up.
You're listening to Glove Up or Shut Up on the Angry Marks Podcast Network.
You're listening to Glove Up or Shut Up on AngryMarks.com with Peter H. and Stevie J. Find them on Twitter at HardcoreCDN and at AngryMarks. And now, for all the news, reviews, and interviews in mixed martial arts, it's time for Glove Up or Shut Up from AngryMarks.com.
And welcome everybody to another episode of Glove Up or Shut Up, right here on AngryMarks.com. My name is Peter H., and I'm joined once again by my co-host from Omaha, Nebraska, Stevie J.
Hey, Peter, how does it feel to have a liberal parliament in Canada?
Liberal parliament. For those who don't know, we had an election here in Canada, and the Conservatives, who had the majority, got their butts kicked and are been reduced from the leading party to the official opposition. So,
Her Majesty's Royal Opposition.
Yes, exactly. Basically, you have the local ridings, and then whichever party has the most ridings won, their party's leader is the Prime Minister.
Oh, I see. So, de facto, whoever is the leader of the party becomes the Prime Minister.
You got it.
I understand.
And, it's the first time in 10 years we're gonna have, a new Prime Minister, so.
Although he's the son of the former Prime Minister.
Yeah, it's the first legacy in Canadian politics, and, it's different. I mean, it was the biggest seat change in our history, and, this is the first time a party that finished third in the last election ended up being first in the next one.
And as I understand it, there's a Green Party that has like one seat in Parliament, and then there's like a Quebecois bloc that has like 40 seats, but neither of those were enough to form a majority and be the government.
The Bloc Québécois got 10 seats.
Oh, so less than I thought then, actually.
Yeah, it's a party mostly in Quebec. I think it's only in Quebec, really. But, they were pretty big back in the 90s when I was in school. They forced a referendum in Quebec to see if they could separate, and it was a very close vote. But one interesting fact, I have to double check my math, but I recall that when mixed martial arts was trying to get legislated in Parliament, the bill was seconded by Justin Trudeau.
It's a good coincidence.
Because when MMA was trying to make its way into being legal across the country, federal, it was technically illegal. There was a federal law on the books from like the 40s, and there was a bill introduced that basically, we should fix that, and they did.
That means you got the right guy for the job now to lead the country. He's a progressive.
Absolutely, and who knows, we might see more UFC fights, so that's always a good thing.
That wouldn't be bad for Canada, but I gotta warn you in advance that starting this weekend, we pretty much don't get a weekend off UFC for the rest of the year.
That's not...
So, don't say that,
Wait, that's not true. I'm like, wait, you're right. Oh my god.
Yeah, so don't say that there's never such thing as not too many UFC fights, because you're about to find out.
Yeah, a lot of them are like fight nights or fight pass, and I think the next pay-per-view is November, I believe, with Ronda Rousey
and Holly Holm.
In Australia.
Indeed. That should be one hell of a show.
Yeah, it's, I don't know. We talked about oversaturation on this show in the past, and I don't think it's oversaturation when it comes to having an off weekend here, there, and wherever, but apparently UFC decided their roster was oversaturated.
Yeah, they cut 50 people.
No, that's the rumor right now. That's 50. As of this recording, I think the number of releases that we know about is up to 12.
Well, Dave said 50, and by Dave I mean Dave Meltzer, so I'm going to go with that even if we don't know who all the names are.
Yeah, we don't know who all of them are. There was a report from, I believe it was a Swedish newspaper that broke it, saying that up to 50 fighters are going to get cut. Let's see, I have the list here. There are some notable names in these cuts. The first one, I think we predicted this last week with Francisco Trevino.
Yes, I believe we did.
We didn't talk about his post-fight, though.
Oh, well, what do you want to say about that?
He tested positive for marijuana.
Well, they're not going to need many excuses to cut people when they have over 500 people on the roster, and if you're not as big a star as Nick Diaz, you don't get away with failing a pot test.
Other cuts, Amir Sadallah.
Yeah, well, they brought him back on a limited basis, so I would say that the time ran out on him for accomplishing what he wanted to.
Let's see, Tough Brazil 2 runner-up, William Macario. Ivan George, Nayuki Katani, David Michaud, Wagner Roca, Leonardo Mafa Teixeira, Luis Gonzalez, Joe Merritt, Pavel Palak, Hernani Papudo, TJ Wahlberg, that was a surprise, Roger Zapata, and Luke Zachrich.
No real huge surprises there as far as I'm concerned. That guys that were just kind of gatekeepers on prelims, nobody major.
Roca with a 1-3 record in UFC, that kind of surprised me when I saw that stat.
Yeah, no, he was not very successful.
But in minor leagues, he can come back.
It's possible. Like I said, they brought back Amir Sadallah, so who's to say they wouldn't bring back Wagner Roca?
But with these names now released, I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about more next week, but they're naming it Black Friday because that's when that report first came out, and all of a sudden we saw 4 or 5 cuts right off the bat. It's kind of weird. Oh, Marcus Brimage was another one.
Oh, well, he wasn't having the best luck in his most of his fights, so I guess I'm not surprised by that either.
Now, that's the one that wore the Dragon Ball thing at the weigh-ins, right?
Right, yeah, he wore the visor that the characters in the show wear to read power levels. Ask Big D about that. He can tell you all about it, but Brimage,
I'm not bugging D right now. He's on his honeymoon.
I know, but I meant later. All I can tell you is that he was 1-4 in his last 5 fights, so Brimage was going nowhere fast.
Yeah. Oh, and the retired Saul Pelea is cut by UFC.
I suppose it doesn't make any difference.
I don't know if he retired before he got cut or cut and then retired. Who knows? That's like when someone breaks up in high school. Well, he broke up with me. No, she broke up with me. Oh, shut up. Mm-hmm. But Saul Pelea, I mean, I think he's going to turn into a coach, which, that could be good.
Yeah. Probably time for him to start a new chapter in his career.
But we do have to talk about World Series of Fighting 24 that happened this past weekend. And,
did you watch it?
I saw bits and pieces. NBC Sports Network, not the most available network here in Canada, so.
Alright.
I had trouble finding the fight. But John Fitch beating Yushin Okami 30-27, 30-27, 29-28.
Take any John Fitch fight you ever saw in UFC that he won. That was this fight.
No surprise.
No surprise. He used what he does best, and anybody that gets mad at him for that just doesn't know what John Fitch is about. You've got to expect going in that he's going to use dominant takedowns and ground position and go for submissions when there are openings, but basically his entire game is to get a hold of a guy and not let go and make his life miserable, and that's exactly what he did.
Blagoy Ivanov beating Derek Memon by strikes at 4:33 of the second round.
Now, this was a fun fight, but it depends on what kind of fights you're into, if you like one-sided beatings or not, because as far as I'm concerned, Derek Mammon was screwed right from the start. By the end of the first round, he was already bleeding, and even though he had a little bit of reach and a little bit of weight on his opponent, he just doesn't hit as hard as Blagoy Ivanov. And in the second round, he was turning into a crimson mask, and he was trying to wipe away the blood from his left eye so he could see. And at the same time he was wiping away his eyes, Ivanov just came crashing into him with a left hook. And at first you thought he was going to be able to weather it and stay standing, but then he started to back up like he was going to back away and try to recover. And then as he's backing away, he stumbles and falls to the canvas, and Ivanov dives right on him and starts pounding on him, and the referee has to sprint across the cage to get in there and break it up. So he was a second or two late on the stoppage, but there was no question who won that fight. Ivanov defeated him handily.
But it wasn't the worst stoppage you've seen.
No, not even close to being the worst, but the referee could have been in a little better position. Don't ask me who it was, I don't remember.
And Ivanov retains the heavyweight title.
Yes indeed he does.
Nick Newell beating Tom Marciano with a unanimous decision 2-1.
Yeah, and Marcelino was not very thrilled about it after the fight. He kind of threw a tantrum and got in Nick Newell's face and declared that he won the fight and not Newell. And Newell, I'm not making this up, he actually said, "Be a better sport, bro. You lost."
And tell us why we're not going to see a rematch.
Well, Newell has decided to call it a day. He feels the training is getting a little too grueling, a little too hard for him. He probably realizes there's a limited upside to being an extraordinary fighter who does amazing things for being a guy who only has one full arm. But at the same point, if you've already fought your way up to fighting a champion like Justin Gaethje, and he got soundly beaten in that fight, then where do you go from there? I mean, you work your way back up to Gaethje again, it's going to be the same thing again. We already saw that with Luis Palomino, so I think he knows that the trainings just get too hard for him and there's nowhere to go.
And there's no promotion he would jump to.
I don't know how many promotions would take him. World Series Fighting kind of took a shot on him because he's a unique guy with a unique story, and they certainly can use any kind of publicity they can get since they're running a distant third to the other two. So I don't think UFC would have ever taken him. And Bellator, that's a 50-50 at best.
Would he do any success maybe in Japan?
Yeah, I suppose he could probably do something in Japan, but hey, I respect the guy's choice. If he realizes that he's reached his peak of physical prowess and there's nowhere he can go from there, then he's making the right decision to step away and live the rest of his life any way he wants.
Hey, if he wants to walk away from a sport and do a job where you don't get hit in the face, go for it.
Yeah, I say that about everybody. In fact, the former Bellator heavyweight champion actually did that. He decided to walk away from getting hit in the face to be a farmer. I mean, you can laugh at that if you want to, but I respect him for making that choice.
We move on to Vinny Magalhaes against Matt Hamill.
Yeah, well, there was one chance for Matt Hamill in this fight. He was giving up age. He was giving up a significant degree of jiu-jitsu experience because Magalhaes is a black belt and multiple-time world champion. So he had to rock him and rock him early and hope that it didn't go to the ground. So he hit him with an uppercut, and Magalhaes looked like he was dazed for a little bit. But then when he went to the ground, that was a wrap because he got a hold of a knee bar and Hamill couldn't do anything. And he hung on for a few seconds, but he ultimately tapped out.
Is this the end of Matt Hamill?
Well, it's been the end of Matt Hamill 2 or 3 times now. This was his second comeback from retirement, so I really don't know what the point is of Matt Hamill continuing to fight. You can't make the argument, unlike Nick Newell, that he's young, he could get over it, he could still achieve things. Hamill's pushing 40 now, he's nearly there, so he already got as far as he was going to get. He reached his peak by being the only guy to hold a win over John Jones. Even if it was a disqualification that none of us agree with, he can still hold that and anybody that asked him what he ever did, he could say, I beat John Jones. So you're not going to get much better than that.
Knee bar submission, round 1, 1:08 is the official time. And the opening of the main card was for the flyweight title, the first ever champion, Magomed
Let me help you out.
Bibulatov beating Donovan Frelo.
Yes.
50-45 across the board.
And really not a surprise to me because actually I went 5 for 5 in my picks for this show. I'm sure you noticed that, but I have to say Bibulatov is everything that I thought he would be when they signed him and made a big deal out of his signing. Not to say Donovan Frelo wasn't game. I mean, he went the distance. He was in there for the entire fight, but he was just getting outpointed every single round. Bibulatov was faster. Bibulatov was stronger, and Bibulatov is a very explosive striker. If you were watching this fight, Peter, I'm sure you noticed he had quite the arsenal of spinning back kicks and spinning back fists and front heel kicks. And he threw the kitchen sink out there. He was putting on a show.
I'm surprised more fighters don't have the spinning back fist in their arsenal.
Yeah, well, I think you got to be really, really good to be able to land it effectively because it's one of those. You hit it and it lands and it's brilliant, but if you miss by a country mile. But Bibulatov, I wouldn't say he missed every single time, but he did miss on more than a few of them. So I would say it's just more of a factor of showing a guy that you can't be safe just thinking you're outside of his range because he could swing that back fist and catch you.
Now on the prelims, one fight that did catch my eye was Colton Smith beating Washington Nunes da Silva with a unanimous decision, 30-26 across the board.
Yeah, and I believe there was a 1-point deduction which resulted in that score.
Okay. Alright, so let's just move on because we got 2 shows this weekend, and I believe the first one is Bellator 144.
Yes, that's right, and the show will be main evented by Rafael Cavallo, who's won 11 fights in a row, versus the former Bellator middleweight champion, Bull Brandon Halsey, who is undefeated. Now, if you haven't been following this story and you're new to Glove Up or Shut Up, the reason he's undefeated and a former champion is because he missed weight for the fight with Kendall Grove, so they stripped him of the title, but he still beat Kendall Grove in the fight anyway, so in fact, go check out my interview with him on MMA Mania this week because I told him it's really odd for me to call him undefeated and a former champion. And he had to admit that doesn't sound right to him either.
You gotta think he's gonna make weight here.
Yeah, and he said to me he's not a guy who makes excuses. He missed weight and it was unprofessional and he apologized for that, but he did say that he had some issues going into that fight. He had just gotten over an illness. He had messed up his ankle pretty bad in training camp, and things just didn't go right for him. But he said that's never going to happen to him again. We'll see. He'll weigh in this week, and we'll find out.
We've heard that before from fighters who miss weight for the first time, and that next time they're on the scale, I don't know who's more nervous, the fans, the promoter, or the fighter.
Anytime Johnny Hendricks gets on a scale now, I'm going to be super nervous.
Anytime Rumble Johnson gets on a scale, I get nervous.
Well, at least Rumble Johnson is fighting in the right weight class for him now.
I wonder if Bellator fighters can go on the Dolce diet.
I assume anybody can if they're willing to pay what he charges.
Yeah, hurts.
It's not cheap.
Penny.
It's very expensive. And BJ Penn had some rather harsh accusations of how effective it was for how much he spent.
Dennis Olsen fights Brennan Ward.
Yeah, and I don't mean to say this is a tomato can fight, but Dennis Olsen was the guy that was basically fed to Paul Daly at the last show they had at the Mohegan Sun Arena, so I really don't expect anything different here. Dennis Olsen's kind of a journeyman fighter. Brennan Ward has looked spectacular ever since he came down to welterweight. I don't see this being any different.
And it will last more than one round.
Not the way Brennan Ward fights. He's a very reckless, abandoned guy. He'll win big or he'll lose big, so he's not going to be afraid to come out there and just start swinging for the fences. That's his style.
Charlie Ontiveros fights Michael Page.
Again, don't mean to say tomato can, but they need to start giving Michael Page some stiffer competition. The only really significant guy that he's faced is Nashon Burrell, formerly of UFC. He needs to be fighting guys that are seriously higher in caliber. And Ontiveros is a real guy. Don't get me wrong. He has a long history in Legacy Fighting Championships, but in his last 6 fights, he's 3-3, which to me says this is a very beatable guy.
And Isao Kobayashi fights Godi Yamauchi.
Yeah, and this actually got moved up from the prelims because of the fact that there was originally supposed to be a bantamweight title fight between Eduardo Dantas and Marcos Galvão, which would actually have been a rematch of the fight that the two of them previously fought, except now Galvão is the champion, but Dantas got injured in training, fight got scratched. They did talk about Joe Warren being a possible replacement, but he got popped for marijuana, so that's not happening either. So this fight is 2 strikers who are looking to make their way into featherweight contention.
And Kobayashi is the former king of Pancrase.
Yes, he's got that going for him. So he's a prospect. He's somebody to watch, but we're going to see if he delivers on that potential because Yamauchi is a super tough dude.
Mm-hmm. Now, is there any fights in the prelims? If there was one you had to pick to stand out that people should watch?
Well, if I'm going to name one, it would probably be Matt Bissett and Kevin Roddy.
Yeah.
Other than that, not a lot of huge names on the prelim card, but it's some good fights.
No, I agree with you. The Bissett-Roddy fight, that's what I'm looking forward to as well. Mm-hmm. Now we move on to UFC Fight Night this weekend, and it's in Dublin, Ireland, so hopefully Conor McGregor will be in the crowd.
Yeah, I think if the timing had warranted it, they actually would have had him fighting on the card, but just didn't pan out this time. And a lot of things didn't pan out about this card, actually. There was fights that got scrapped, but you can talk about that.
Well, I've got the main card here in the prelims, and just a note that the Fight Pass fights start at 1 o'clock.
Yeah, it's the time shift.
And the main card starts at 4. So if you're watching college football, you got to make a choice this weekend.
Absolutely.
But it's Fight Pass. You can PVR the Fight Pass shows.
Right, of course.
So that kind of negates that argument. Now, Joseph Duffy fighting Dustin Poirier. That's a big fight, but is it a main event fight?
You've got to point out, it's probably obvious to point it out for anybody listening to a mixed martial arts podcast, but it still has to be said. Joe Duffy has a rather unique statistic, much like when we talk about, the whole situation with Matt Hamill, that he's got something he can brag about. So, you know where I'm going with this, right?
Oh yeah, go for it.
Well, Joe Duffy, since you just mentioned it, is the last person who beat Conor McGregor at Cage Warriors 38 back in 2010.
That's quite the feather in his cap.
Yes, indeed. And it was a fight in Ireland, too. So I'm sure McGregor would like to avenge that loss at some point. But since he's the interim champion right now, he's got bigger fish to fry.
Absolutely. But is this a main event fight? I see these two guys, and it just doesn't scream main event.
Well, it wouldn't be a main event in Canada or the United States, but for the market we're talking about, for a fight night in Dublin, crowd's going to be really amped up for this one. Joe Duffy is a local hero, and he's fighting a super tough dude in Poirier, so it's going to be a hell of a fight.
So it's going to be a scrap. It's not a tomato can fight. It's going to be something where the fans are going to get their money's worth.
I think so.
Now, who you got?
I'm going to say Joe Duffy. I think he'll be pumped up by being in front of a hometown crowd, and I think his track record lately says that he is coming into his own, because he's got 4 straight wins, and they're all by different methods. A rear naked choke, a knockout, a triangle choke, a TKO. He's showing off his versatility and skill, and definitely making a name for himself right now in the lightweight division. I see big things in his future.
Well, I'm going to go with Duffy as well, basically for the same reasons you said. I think the hometown crowd will give him that boost. I don't think he's the type of fighter that will disappoint from his hometown crowd. We've seen fighters in the past where they're at home and they just get the extra boost of energy is a negative thing, and they just don't fight their usual fight.
Well, the odds makers do believe that Duffy is the favorite here. He's minus 240, and Poirier is plus 200.
Paddy Holohan against Louis Smolka.
This one's almost a coin flip. Smolka is minus 120. Holohan is plus 100.
Wow, really?
Yeah. Why did you think Holohan would be the favorite?
Why, yeah, but I thought maybe pick 'em or just flip what you just said.
Well, I mean,
it's going to be close.
They're both coming off wins. They've both only had one loss in their last few fights, so it really could go either way.
Riza Madadi fights Norman Park.
And on this one, Norman Park is not a huge favorite, but he is a favorite at minus 280. Reza Madadi is plus 240. And I think based on Norman Park's striking power, it makes sense for him to be a favorite here. In fact, the only two losses that he's had recently are both split decisions, so I think this is his chance to come back and show the old form that he had before that.
Yeah, I think Park's got this one for sure. Nicholas Dalby against Darren Till is the opening fight on the main card.
Yes, and almost a coin flip again. Dalby is minus 135, Till is plus 115.
Now, on the prelims, a couple of names on here, but the one fight, if I had to pick up one fight, has to be Eric Almeida against Alsing Daly.
I had a feeling you were going to go with that, and I like Alsing Daly, so that should be a fun scrap, but I'm actually more interested in Darren Elkins and Robert Whiteford.
Yeah, as someone famously says, that could be a slobber knocker.
It could be.
But the prelims, as I said, start at 1 o'clock Eastern, and 4 o'clock is when the main card starts. And we'll just have to, see if the main card see if the main event lives up to their billing.
But you know what? It's a fight night card. It's not a pay-per-view, so it's not something that you have to worry about if it doesn't turn out to be the greatest thing you've ever seen, because it's a minor show.
Now let's talk the news, and we got a bunch of stuff to talk about, including World Series of Fighting 25 coming up, and they've announced an 8-man lightweight tournament, and the field has been set, plus Jason High fighting Estevan Payan. So let's see, Luis Palomino fights Rich Padashnak, and he'll fight the winner of that fights Brian Foster and Joao Zeffirino. And the other side of the bracket sees Brian Cobb fight Mike Ricci from UFC, and Islam Mamedov fights Jorge Patino.
It's a decent lineup.
I like Palomino and Ricci. I think those are the two I'm going to go with.
Yeah, I would say they're probably your money favorites in this, although it's really weird that the winner of this gets a lightweight title shot, and Palomino has already lost to Gaethje twice, so if he won this tournament and got a third fight, how do you see it going any different than the first two?
I don't know, but he's got to go through two quality opponents to do that.
That's true, but I really do. I like Ricci as, the guy who could surprise everybody and run the table here.
But those fights are pretty good, though.
Yeah, absolutely they are. And there are guys in here that have fought Gaethje before, like I just said. You've got Palomino who's fought him twice. You've got Patishnak who fought him and lost. Well, everybody who fought Gaethje has lost. He's undefeated, so it goes without saying. But some of these guys are trying to get a second crack at him.
Can Palomino get a better nickname, please?
I asked him about it. He said it just defines his strength and his power in a cage. And he said to him it's a compliment, and it was given to him by his fellow teammates. So,
for those who don't know, his nickname is Baboon.
the dude likes it. He thinks it's a term of endearment from his fellow fighters. So I'm not going to argue with him. Are you going to argue with Luis Palomino? I'm not.
He's a lightweight. No, I'm good.
Yeah, exactly what I thought.
Now, this tournament was supposed to happen in Seattle. However, the regulatory restrictions forced them to move the show to Arizona.
Yeah, they weren't going to allow a one-night tournament. It's not in their sanctioning in Seattle, so no.
You think they would have a unified for that? You know what I mean? Like, I know we have unified rules for mixed martial arts. You would think they'd have some type of tournament rule in place for the entire USA.
You'd think, but it's one of those things that I think because not many people do one-day tournaments anymore, that it's going to be a patchwork of regulation for it because it doesn't come up very often.
Now, we talked about Bellator 144, and Yamauchi, I don't know if you agree with this, Stevie. He says he's the best featherweight in Bellator.
Well, he's got an opinion. He's entitled to his opinion. You know, I wouldn't say...
He's in the conversation, but I don't think he's the best.
No, he's got to beat some bigger names. He's beaten Sal Almeida and Mike Rickman, and I'll give him respect for both of those, but he also lost to Will Martinez in a featherweight tournament, and Will Martinez is not the best featherweight in Bellator, so there's something wrong with that argument then. If he puts together 3 or 4 wins against some of the best guys out there, then he can make that argument. Start by beating Kobayashi, and then let's talk.
Sage Northcutt is fighting Cody Pfister at UFC Fight Night 80, and they're actually using the hashtag Sage and Paige for the Fight Pass show.
Yes, because it's Sage Northcutt and Paige Van Zandt. And I already heard Dave Meltzer's rant about this. He thinks it's a big mistake that this isn't a show that's on Fox with millions of viewers. He thinks they're making a bad play here.
Well, Kevin Lee is angry. He wanted to fight Northcutt, but I think...
Yeah, he said he wanted to teach that privileged white boy a lesson.
Oh, that's...
I'm not using the exact words he used, but I'm paraphrasing. That's pretty much
I think it's better you paraphrased.
Yeah, I think he might have actually said worse, but it is what it is. He was trying to call Sage Northcutt out, and it didn't work.
Well, maybe we'll get that fight down the road.
Depends. Depends on which direction their careers are going.
Yeah. Sheldon Westcott and Edgar Garcia, their fight has been moved to UFC 195 in January.
All right.
Let's see. The ABC Rules and Regulations Committee is addressing, get this, 12-6 elbows, 10-8 rounds, and the cruiserweight division.
What do they need to change about the cruiserweight division?
I think they're just meeting to address it, like they're trying to see what they can do. You know how these committees do their business. It's guys in a stuffy room and they talk for hours. You know what I mean? Like it's part of the process. I get it, but it's like I'd rather them focus more on 10-8 rounds and 12-6 elbows.
Definitely do something about the 12-6 elbows because that's just stupid.
Yeah. We mentioned Sal Palea retiring, which sad to see him go. UFC on Fox 18, there's a fight that's been talked about by both of these fighters. They want to be on this card, and it's a great fight. Patrick Cote and Neil Magny.
Oh, yeah. I would pay to see that.
But the Fox 18, unless you're paying as in going in person to see it.
Right.
But, yeah, I mean, I think that fight could... Hell, I'd put that on the main card. I wouldn't put that on the prelims.
No, definitely not.
Let's see, what else was there? I'm not sure if this is true. I put this with a big question mark. I don't know if you've heard about this one yet. But New Jersey's commission is putting their judges in soundproof booths.
So they can't be influenced by the crowd?
Or the trainers or the coaches, maybe.
Well, that makes sense to me, actually, especially if you've ever been at any kind of fight where a Jackson Winklejohn guy is in the cage. Because
I think I watched one fight where they put the mic in the wrong place, and all you heard was their camp barking instructions during the fight. I'm like, move the mic.
No, it's not just that. it's, you just gotta hear when they call out every single shot that lands by one of their fighters. Great punch! That was fantastic! You got him on the ropes! It's like, you're trying to influence the judges with that. Don't tell me you're not. You're not just motivating your fighter when you say things like that. You're trying to make the judges see what you're seeing and you want them to see it your way.
I don't know if this will catch on. I mean, I see your point. I just don't know if it'll catch on.
Yeah, it may be just taking the whole thing too far to put them in soundproof booths. I think you can instruct the judges to ignore the crowd, ignore the coaches, and just concentrate on the action in front of them. I don't know if soundproof booths are really necessary, but it's still an evolving and growing sport, so I'm not going to say they're wrong for experimenting with this. Give it a try, see if you like it or not.
Why don't they just put on, like, headphones?
Well, that might actually be a deficit. See, this would be the argument against the soundproof booths, because different punches land with different force and velocity, and sometimes when you're sitting there at cage side, you can tell who is landing the power punches simply by what you're hearing in front of you. If one guy's throwing little pitter-pat punches, but he's landing a lot of them, it might look like he's winning on TV, but if the other guy throws 2 or 3 really big punches that makes the other guy wobble, and you can hear the thud when those punches land, you can tell who is actually doing better.
Now let's move on to Ryan Bader and Rumble Johnson.
Yes, what's the latest?
Okay, so I'm going to paraphrase here because it's a really long post, but essentially Rumble Johnson wants to fight Bader. Because Bader's going around saying he's the next contender for the title, and Johnson's like, you haven't beat anyone in the top 3. I'll fight you, I want to fight you. And Bader's camp's like, no, we're good. I'm like, so Bader's camp is hiding from a fight from Rumble Johnson? He's ranked ahead of you.
Yeah, this is exactly the fight that Bader wants if he wants to get a title shot.
No, unfortunately, the story goes, unfortunately for Rumble, the Bader's camp doesn't see any value in granting a chance that could derail his opportunity to fight for the title. We have the utmost respect for Anthony Johnson. We think he's a tremendous talent and he's got good representation. If I was advising Anthony, I'd be telling him to do the exact same thing, call out Bader. Why? Because that's your fastest track to getting a title shot, and that's what these guys are in the sport to be for champion. And title shots don't grow on trees. His manager also said that Bader and Johnson's paths may eventually cross, but right now they're set on waiting for their opportunity to fight Cormier.
Well, that's fine to say in theory, but you wait around for something too long, and you might end up not getting it at all. He needs to stay active.
What if, like, UFC makes the fight? Then he can't, like, hide, you know what I mean? Like, if UFC books that fight.
Well, are
he
you
doesn't have to take
actually
it, but
accusing Bader of hiding? Is that what you're saying here?
Well, I'm looking at the latest rankings right now on UFC's website. Rumble is actually number 1, Gustafsson is 2, Bader is 3. So Bader is top 3, but Cormier's beat Johnson, Cormier's beat Gustafsson. So why wouldn't Bader get that shot next?
I don't know.
Yeah, it's really weird to me that, I mean, I'd love to see a Bader Johnson fight more, I think, than a Cormier fight right now, because I think Bader, I shouldn't say have to earn it, but his last fight didn't scream to me, this guy gets a title shot. So, I know you be the man, you gotta beat the man, but Johnson, I think that fight makes more sense.
Yeah, I'll grant you that.
And it's just, I don't want to say he's hiding, but it sounds that way. Cyborg is putting photos up online, claiming she's on the way down to 140. I don't know. I still say we're gonna see this fight one day, but Rousey, she's doing the smart thing. She's not even putting 2 seconds of thought into it. She's focusing on her opponent right now, and that's going to be a big fight in Australia, but if you've got Cyborg and she doesn't lose a lot of her, if she maintains a lot of her strength at 135, if she ever gets down there, I have a feeling it's going to be like a Mike Tyson fight. It's going to be really good, or it's going to be like 30 seconds long. No.
We'll see if that fight ever happens. I've pretty much reached my limit on speculating about whether or not it will.
Well, I guess that's all the news I have here. I'm just trying to see something here, but it doesn't really appear to be going anywhere on my news. So, is there anything on your list that I forgot to mention today?
No, I think we covered it all.
And how was the Pillow Fight League interview?
Oh, Brandy Dolly? You haven't heard that yet?
Nope, not yet.
She is really cool. Just go ahead and listen to the YouTube clip of it, because I uploaded the whole thing to youtube.com/AngryMarks.com, and if you thought it was a joke and you weren't taking it seriously before the interview, afterward you'll change your mind.
And obviously other great shows in the network like Undisputed Wrestling, who had Les Thatcher on. And before we go, I do want to give a big congratulations to a friend of the site, Big D over at SuperFriendsUniverse.com. He got married this past weekend.
It's a great time in his life. It's great for him. What else can I say? We're just super happy that he and Alessandra have tied the knot.
Mm-hmm. He's joining the ranks of married podcasters.
Yes, indeed, just like you and I.
Absolutely. All right, well, that's going to do it for the show this week. For Stevie J, I'm Peter H., the Hardcore Canadian. Thanks for listening. As I always say, never leave it to the judges. Good night, everybody.
Come on!